Welcome to Mystery Conversations, a Bell Cow podcast. I'm Rob Young.
And I'm Michael McBride. We're the people behind Bell Cow Productions.
We're bringing you an encore recording of Minnesota Mystery Night, a live monthly author event held the third Monday of each month at Lucky's 13 in Mendota, Minnesota.
Now just kick back and enjoy.
I have a question for all of you. Why are there so many lawyers who write mystery? And I'm not just talking about lawyers who practice in the criminal system. I'm talking about estate planning lawyers and real estate lawyers. All the lawyers seem to think they can write. But perhaps you can ask that question of Toni Halleen. Toni is an employment discrimination lawyer and managing partner at the firm of Schaefer Halleen in Minneapolis. As a recovering lawyer myself, I think Toni has an accurate view of the legal profession as reflected in the award-winning musical which she wrote named Soulless Blood-Sucking Lawyers. In addition to being a playwright, Toni's been a stand-up comic, improv actor, teacher of a think-on-the-spot skills to professionals, preferably not the blood-sucking kind, and an accomplished ballroom dancer. She's written numerous short stories and 2 psychological thrillers published by HarperCollins, The Surrogate and The Good Samaritan. She's a graduate of Mount Holyoke College, the oldest college in the country. All women's college in the country, and the University of Minnesota Law School, and she lives in Minneapolis. Our second featured author this evening is S.L. Smith, Sharon to her friends. Sharon is the author of the Culnane Mystery Series, now 11 books in length, with the release of her newest, Revenge. She's a graduate of St. Catherine's University and has spent 32 years with the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, working with law enforcement and fire officials on the state and local levels. She credits that experience and the contacts she made during that time for providing her the foundation upon which she has written her 11 police procedurals. Her first book, Blinded by the Sight, is an illustration of her droll sense of humor, since Sharon is visually impaired, shall we say. She's known for her meticulous research. She's also a lifelong Minnesota resident and an inveterate Minnesota Twins fan. And she is known for her research, which makes me wonder, Sharon, the way the Twins have been playing, are you doing research for a book called, like Murder on the Bases or something like that? Okay, so whether you're into psychological thrillers, into police procedurals, ballroom dancing, or Minnesota Twins, we have for you tonight these 2 marvelous, awesome women. Sharon Smith, S.L. Smith, and Toni Halleen.
Thank you so much, Rob, for that great introduction. And thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We had a fun time connecting just ahead of this to get to know each other a little bit. One of the first things I wanted to ask you about is your writing process.
First of all, I'm definitely a pantser. There are pantsers and plotters. If I knew what was going to happen in my book, I probably wouldn't write it because I'd already be bored. So, for example, my first book, Blinded by the Sight, I knew 2 things. A homeless man was murdered, and he's wearing a huge diamond ring. The only way I found out what happened is through my 2 investigators, Pete Culnane and Martin Tierney, because they're meeting with people, asking questions, and that's how I get information. Now, invariably, with my books, I am wrong about whodunit.
How can that be? Say more about that, please.
Well, they pull in this information, and so this person has a lot of reasons to look suspicious. So I'm going, But then they find someone else, and now I have another person to suspect. And while they're doing research, of course, that means I'm doing research. Interestingly enough for me, working on my first book, first of all, I want things to be really accurate. So I had this body in St. Paul's Upper Landing, shadow of the High Bridge, and I wanted to know what the medical examiner's office would do when they got there.
What they would do with a body?
What they would do with the body, how they would handle it, what they would wear. So I called the Ramsey County Medical Examiner's office. I explained who I was and that I was a St. Paul author and asked if I could speak with someone. And they put me in touch with their lead investigator. Described the weather. He told me what they would be wearing and what they would do at the crime scene. and how they would interact with the police and everything. Through that, and Don helped me with like my first 10 books. And he put me in touch with other police officers and was always there. In fact, his son designed the cover for my third book, Murder on a Stick. Anyone care to guess where that happened?
Where does that one take place?
My thought was this. You can get anything on a stick at the Minnesota State Fair. I wanted to take it one step further. And they have come up with the phrase now that you can get anything on a stick at this Minnesota State Fair. I was saying that way before they were.
Can you get murder on a stick?
Somehow someone managed. Like I said, I'm intent on keeping things accurate. The problem is this. I wanted there to be a murder at the State Fair and Pete and Martin to have to investigate it. But the problem is the Minnesota State Fair is in Falcon Heights, and my cops are St. Paul cops. And furthermore, there's a State Fair Police Department. Interestingly enough, the perpetrator murdered the person in the East Como parking lot. In other words, in St. Paul. Honestly, what were the chances of that happening?
That's so convenient for you.
It was. And like I said, I do a ton of research. So I had to go to the State Fair, much to my chagrin, and spent days there. I went online and found every single stand that sold something on a stick. I went to the stand and said, "Can I buy one of your sticks? Don't take this personally. It's not that I have anything against your food, but I'm doing research." And invariably, they gave me one of their sticks, and I took my little Flair pen and wrote down the stand and what was sold on that stick.
Don't you think you could have gotten the free food, though?
I probably could have, but first of all, I'm on a low-carb diet.
Okay, that would not have worked.
That would have been a huge problem.
That would have been a problem. Okay.
So then, I'm telling you about the lead investigator for Ramsey County Medical Examiner's Office. I took him out to lunch, and I laid all the sticks out, and I said, "Okay, Don, which one was used?" And he picked the stick. Also, in doing the research for that book, I was talking to all kinds of people, including the law enforcement people, the State Fair Police Department, and I spoke with a woman who was working at one of the information booths. And I'm asking her all these questions, and she said, "You know what? If you come back next Tuesday, every year we get a 3-ring binder, and it has all this information about the fair in it. I'll bring my last year's book and give it to you." So, of course, I was there. I got the book.
They're like, this lady loves her State Fair trivia.
Yes, and that book has a ton of State Fair trivia in it, including, did you know the very first time Teddy Roosevelt said, "Walk softly and carry a big stick," was when he was still the vice president, and it was in the Minnesota grandstand?
Whoa. You got to memorize that for next time you're at trivia night. You might need to know that.
Also, Murder on a Stick, the last 6 or 8 pages, contains a list of everything that's sold on the stick at the State Fair in 2012.
Oh, my goodness. That's a lot of stuff. Well, here's another one. My husband was kicked out of the State Fair and banned for life. So you could work that into one of your books, perhaps.
Really?
These unruly teenagers.
Yes. So let's go back to the writing part.
Okay.
Because of my vision, I mean, I can sit there and type away, but I can't read what's going on that screen. I can. I can read approximately 2 words at a time. If I see 2 words, I have to concentrate on one to see what it is. And then when I look at the second word, I can't see the first one anymore. So for me to read my book and edit it on the screen, it would take me a lifetime to do the first page. Thank goodness for modern technology, because what I do is I sit there and write the book, and I firmly believe that there's a magical connection between my fingertips and that keyboard, that the story starts coming when I sit down and put my fingers on that keyboard.
That's why you're a pantser.
Exactly. So anyway, if I was a plotter, think how bad it would be trying to function this way. And I firmly believe that I need to start at the beginning and go to the end and then start editing. So I go in, and thank goodness for Microsoft Word these days, that under review there's an option that says read aloud, and I will click that button and have it start reading. Now here's the option. I have to hurry up and tell it to stop when I find something I want to change. But now it takes me a short eternity to find the cursor and get it to that spot. It is a painstaking process. When I think of the time I waste, you know what? I would have been kicking myself a few years ago, but it is what it is, and it's either do it or don't write.
Yeah,
So-
geez, you write 2 books a year. I mean,
Well, and the reality of that is,
how many books would you be writing?
well, I want to write 25, but I don't think I have that much time. But I was writing one a year, and then it occurred to me, you know what? Time is running out because of my vision, and it continues to worsen. So I better do it as fast as I can. So it's 2 a year now. And so far, we're on track for accomplishing that, but
That's incredible.
I have to tell you one other thing. I decided after book 9 was Pete telling his wife why he became a cop. Because that was not his mission, that was not his goal in life, that was not his dream. But something happened in college that he decided to become a cop. So he's telling her this story, and I thought, you know, this would be a great book to exit on. But then, I love the number 5. So it occurred to me, if I did book 10, it would come out in 2025. How could I not write a book 10? A 10 in 25.
Isn't that your birthday also?
Well, that's off the record.
Oh, sorry.
It's also my father's birthday.
So when you have the computer read it back to you, which voice do you use?
There are several women's voices.
It's like
There's-
Donna, Brian.
No, but every so often, when I'll be, click on read aloud, a screen will come up. I can't even tell you what the whole thing says, but I click OK, it changes to the man's voice. He's not nearly as good a reader. I mean, she reads with an expression, and he and then he went to the corner, and it's like, what? So, anyway, and by the way, a friend of mine told me, you know what? You could do that voice for your audiobooks, but Rob interviews Steve Hendrickson. Guess his company is doing my audiobooks.
Yay!
And so far, Blinded by the Sight and Running Scared are out there. And a guy by the name of Jim Aarons is the narrator. He's got a drop-dead voice.
He's very
got a
good.
Wonderful voice. He's outstanding.
He's very good. He's the one I'm listening to.
Murder on a Stick is almost done.
Oh!
So, but don't wait for the audio version.
I'm hoping they're selling Murder on a Stick tonight. Yeah. That's incredible. And what do you start with? How do you start? What's the idea? Are they based on real crimes, real things from the news?
No. No, like I said, the first book I just knew there was a homeless man with a huge diamond ring.
But how did you know that? Was it an image you saw, or a dream you had, or a person you knew?
Person I knew.
Oh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Pete and Martin, Pete is a combination of my father and a couple of my nephews. Martin is just, I don't know, just dreamt him up. Murder on a Stick, same thing. I just knew that someone was murdered at the state fair in St. Paul's jurisdiction. And I didn't know why, and I knew it was with a stick, but that's all I knew.
Isn't it lovely to have a mind like that and to think of all these horrible things?
Or to be mindless and think about these horrible things.
We like to think of the worst things. Why do we like mysteries? Why do we like murder and crime? I asked you that earlier at dinner.
I think because it's a chance to try to solve the crime before the author does. It's a chance to solve the puzzle.
Yeah, put the pieces together, right?
Yep.
Yeah, there was an article in the paper recently about this question because there are so many mysteries that are popular on stage and on the screen. And there was an article about, I happened to be interviewed for it. That's the only reason I know. They were asking local mystery writers, why? What is it? And the reporter got a number of answers that are all very interesting. And I think they all sort of form the whole picture. I don't think there's one answer for all of us. But I like to say because we're searching for truth. We're searching for answers in our own life. We have problems. Everyone has problems. And these are problems that we can solve, that can be solved. And so many of our problems maybe we feel like they can't be solved. So if we can sort of escape that and read a problem that can be solved, maybe it gives us some kind of hope. that there is some closure, some answers somewhere for some part of what we're struggling with.
So, Toni, tell us about your writing process.
Well, I've been in therapy a lot, so that's maybe that one thing leads to the next. I'm a pantser also, and I never wanted to get my books published. I was just writing to find out how they ended, and I started writing because my therapist suggested it. And I still don't know why she suggested. She didn't really connect the dots for me. And maybe that was part of the reason I'm supposed to connect the dots. But I'm a lawyer, and I was working as a lawyer, and I was a single mom. And then I met my second husband. And he had a kid, and I had a kid. And we were trying to, quote unquote, blend our families. And we needed the help of a therapist. So we were sitting in family therapy, and we had a wonderful therapist. And she suggested I start writing. So I am the firstborn. I'm very compliant. I like to follow rules. And so if she told me to do that, I would do that. And the only way I know how to do anything new is to take a class in it. So I signed up for a class. And luckily in Minnesota, we have the Loft Literary Center. And so I took Intro to Creative Writing at the Loft. I forgot to bring a pen and paper or a laptop. I just showed up to the class, very basic instruction I needed to know how to do it. But in that class, the teacher had us reach into a paper bag and pull out a postcard. She had brought her personal collection of postcards to this class. And she said, don't look, just reach in, pull one out, look at the postcard, start writing for 3 minutes. And my postcard that I pulled out was a snowy cabin in the woods at dark. And it said, Wisconsin. So I started writing, and for whatever reason, what I was writing, the words that were on the page were about a young couple, and they were arguing about a baby, and the baby wasn't theirs. And the teacher said, okay, 3 minutes is up, put your pens down. And I didn't want to stop writing. And she's like, okay, seriously, put your pens down. Thank you, pens down. And I couldn't stop. I mean, I did put my pen down. I'm a compliant firstborn. I follow rules. But that night and all weekend and forever, I kept writing that story because I wanted to know whose baby it was. And because I'm a pantser, I didn't know in advance. I have to just let my hand keep moving for that magic to happen between your hand, as you said, Sharon, and the page to find out what the story is. 10 years later, I finished that book, which became The Surrogate, which was my debut. But the whole 10 years that I was writing it, I was also writing short stories and short plays, songs and comedy material and stuff. I was writing other things. I wasn't the whole time writing that, which was helpful to go away from it and come back. But when I finally finished it, I thought, okay, I'll see what this publishing thing is all about. Like, because every time you tell somebody you're working on a story, they say, well, you're going to get it published. And I was sort of like, no, I don't even know what that is. I'm just trying to find the end of this story. Whose baby is this? Why are they in the cabin? And it was the farthest thing from my mind. So afterwards, I thought, I'll see what this is about. So I took a class in, what is publishing, how does it work, how to get an agent. And I learned that getting an agent is the hardest part. And I learned it's helpful to be good with rejection, and I'm very good with rejection. As I said, I was single for 13 years, and I had done some work in theater, so that's a great experience for rejection. And so I set a goal to get 100 rejections from agents that I sent out my queries to, and I got 44. I'm very, very proud of that. Thank you. Someone shouted loser. It's part of building the skills to have somebody shout loser at me. Anyway, I got 44 rejections, and the 45th person said, I would like to be your agent. And she was somebody I had been taking a class from on how to get an agent. But she wasn't open to new clients. She is still kind of at the end of her career. And she is one of the co-founders of The Loft. It was just she lives in New York, she works in New York, but she had come into town for this special workshop. And I had been giving the same pitch about this book for 10 years. For some reason in that class, when I gave the pitch, I did my usual, which is, it's about a surrogate who changes her mind and goes on the run with the baby and her ex-boyfriend in the snowy woods of Wisconsin, and the couple who are the intended parents trying to find her. For some reason, at this workshop, I also added this. I'm interested in people raising other people's children because I'm a stepmom. And the next day when Marley, who's my agent, emailed me, she said, I'd like to take a look at the first 50 pages. I'm a stepmom too. And for me, that could have been just a coincidence, but I took that as a lesson in just sharing more than I might think is necessary or appropriate or whatever. I just usually hold back things. But for some reason in that room, my body just said, say this sentence, because it was true. Why are you interested in what you're writing? Why are you writing this story? What is it about this story that wants you to spend 10 years with it? Where did it come from in you? What pain is in you that you're tapping into to write through these characters in this book? And for some reason, that resonated with her. And I sent her the first 50 pages. And then, I don't know, a couple of days later, she said, send me the whole manuscript. And then a couple of weeks later, she called and said, I think you have a shot at a major top 5 publisher. And I said, okay. But she said, I think you need to slow the ending down. And I know what she means. I was kind of anxious to finish that book. So I worked with a development editor, and basically the endings had to start halfway through the book, not in the last 20 pages. So I took the book apart from halfway through, sort of, and a little bit in the first part, but kind of put it away and just redid it, starting the ending from the halfway point. And now when I read a book, I can start to see the ending at the halfway point. It's just now I start to see that structure in a book. And the developmental editor didn't tell me how to do it, but she wrote a 6-page letter of feedback that was single-spaced. But remember how I'm good with rejection and everything. So it was fine. But we did that. We slowed the ending down, and then we got a 2-book deal from HarperCollins. And then I had to write a second book. And I was like, where's the postcard? I don't know how to write a second book. So that was a little stressful, Sharon. If I'm honest, it was a little stressful. But as my mom reminds me, it was a challenge and an opportunity. I wrote the second book, which, look, only took me 4 years. It is The Good Samaritan. So, yeah. How do you choose your characters' names? Or Pete's last name in particular?
Yeah, be specific. When I was a kid, 4, 5, 6 years old, I had a babysitter, and her name was Mrs. Culnane. Pete's name, coincidentally, is Pete Culnane. And when I selected that name, I said to my mother, Mom, how did she spell her last name? And Mom said, we just called her Mrs. Culnane. And out of respect, they always referred to her as Mrs. Culnane. And they got her name from someone and called her Mrs. Culnane.
And she was Irish.
She was. So anyway, I spelled it out phonetically, hoping I was right. And unfortunately, I'm a perfectionist. So had I discovered I'd spelled it incorrectly, my game plan was to have Pete's family do genealogical research, discover the spelling had been changed, and it was originally the way my babysitter spelled hers. Well, about 2016 or so, a cousin who lived in Texas had my grandfather's, my father's father's funeral home registry, and asked if I wanted to see it. And I thought, you know what, there's got to be a lot of names there people I haven't thought of forever. So he sent it. And I couldn't read handwriting, but my mom's reading it to me, and she goes, Margaret Culnane. And I'm going, whoa, stop! How does she spell her name? Culnane. And it's like, I'm literally dancing. I'm so excited I did it right.
Ding, 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 ding,
Yes,
ding, ding.
yes. So do you want to know about Pete's family name? How it came to be Culnane?
Yes.
Thank you. I was emailed on May 1st, 2020, by Peter Culnane. The subject was Pete Culnane, and I'm going, whoa, this is really spooky.
Is this a spam, Rob?
Yeah.
Is this a scam?
So I read the email, and he said, "My name is Peter Culnane. He lived across the pond. A friend told me about your books and your main character's name being Pete Culnane. I thought I was the only Pete Culnane in the world. My last name is Culnane because of a registration error when my family moved from County Cork, or from Cork, Ireland, to the UK with a birth. They spelled it Culnane." And what he said was, you know what? Heavy Gaelic accent. I'm sure that the person who was writing it thought he said Culnane. The name is actually Cullinan, Cullinane, which, by the way, in Gaelic means wood of the holly bush or Hollywood.
That's unbelievable.
So,
Truth is stranger than fiction.
yes, and this Pete Culnane, who had emailed me, thought that, it was only his immediate family that had that spelling for the last name. But he told me that his father was the last child of 17 children in his family. So that would have been enough to start their own population anyway. But anyhow, so that amazed me, one of 17 children.
Well, you could sell a lot of books with the Culnane family with 17 people, and
You would
they have
think.
children, and right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, a great experience to get this email from this guy. It's like,
Well, I got an email from somebody, talk about unexpected emails that we get as authors. A woman decided to be a surrogate because she read my book.
wow.
That's a major deal.
Yes.
That's a lot of responsibility. I was like, oh my God. I mean, it's not like I'm in touch with the baby or anything, but maybe I think I have a right to be.
They haven't named you the godmother?
No, I could at least be the godmother.
Really? Is that the most unusual thing that's ever
That's the
happened?
most unusual. Yeah, that's the most unusual. Oh, yeah.
First, for Sharon. So you had to write the 10th book because it was 2025. So why did you write the 11th one?
So I finished book 10, right?
Okay.
And it's end of May, and it's done. And I sort of rolled along till July, and I'm thinking, you know what? First of all, I can't read. I have to just listen to audiobooks, but thankful that they exist. So I'm watching DVDs, watching TV, love Bonanza, have to watch it every Monday through Saturday. And I'm listening to audiobooks, and I'm going, you know what? I honestly can't spend the rest of my life this way. So I went back to writing.
And Toni, you had a 2-book contract. You've written 2 books. What happens now?
Yeah, so the HarperCollins has the right of first refusal for any future project, which is great. And what's also great is there's no time limit. And that's also terrible because I need a deadline. There would be no book 2 if there wasn't a deadline in a contract that said if you don't deliver, then you have to give us back all the money we paid you. I mean, I put the money in a bank account and didn't spend it just because I knew there was a chance I wouldn't be able to deliver. Or even if I finished a book, maybe they would hate it. It was very stressful to do that, but at least the deadline made me write. And I fortunately have a wonderful family that arranged so that I could spend the time to do it. Because as I said, the first book took me 10 years. So first it was an 18-month deadline. Then I got an extension for another 18 months. I need 4 years at least. So, yeah. So I'm writing another book. It's about neighbors spying on each other and finding things they shouldn't find. But I'm learning a lot about city ordinances. I like to read the city codes. If you've ever read,
You what?
So my research, for the first book, I learned all about surrogacy law and read a lot of surrogacy contracts and read a lot about custody disputes and custody battles. And the first book was inspired by a real case, the Baby M case, which was back in the 80s, which is when I was in law school. And when I was in law school, I was taking a family law class, and the Baby M case was happening in the real world. And there weren't CCTV or cell phones or anything. So what happened in that case was the surrogate, which back then they did surrogacy with artificial insemination. It wasn't like it is now. There was no harvesting eggs and stuff like that. It was just turkey baster, And then this little signed contract, you agree you'll give us the baby. Mary Beth Whitehead was the surrogate, and the Stearns were the family, the intended parents. And it was in the New York Times, and it was on Tom Brokaw at night, and that's the only way the nation had any way of knowing what was going on in that story, but the nation was captivated. And I, as a young, naive law student, was fascinated because I was learning about how the law can handle these complicated human problems, and this was a complicated human problem. And we all wanted to know, where does she go with the baby? What is she doing with it? What are her intentions? And we were watching the intended parents crying. You know, they would stand and give a press conference crying and upset. And it was a terrible thing. And all eyes were on the law. Okay, court in New Jersey, what are you going to do? And comes down to a judge, just one guy, you know, like he had to figure it out using the law. And the law back then didn't anticipate this type of dispute among people because the technology wasn't there and the world wasn't such that this was something that was very common enough to have laws about it. And so here we are in law school learning, this is what law can do, and here's how law handles things, and look at all the precedent that has created our law. And this is just brand new stuff, the Wild West. So I was fascinated. I was reading every article and watching every Tom Brokaw about the case and imagining the story. Since it couldn't be showed to us on a video clip, my own brain was imagining, well, where would she go? What would she do? How would she take care of the baby? What if people spotted her? Who's helping her? Why is she doing this? How will this affect the baby? How is it affecting the intended parents? What could they do? How powerless they must feel. And when they go into the court had nothing but the best interest of the child's standard, which is what they used in divorce cases, which is the closest thing they had, two adults both want the same child. So the court says, what is the best interest of the child? And that's what our law professor was teaching us and saying, this is probably what the New Jersey court will be looking at. This is how the New Jersey law will probably handle it. Here's how they've handled it in the past. And we're all going, but this is different. But how is this going to be different? And we all had to just wait and see. And so that was in the late 80s. To write this book, I got to use my imagination of what was happening, and I got to read all the actual court cases and things like that, which is fun, you know, reading court cases. It's sort of fun. It's fun when it's not your case. Let's put it that way. And what happened in the meantime, between 1988 and whenever that was that I was in therapy with my new husband, I had gone through a divorce. I had been in a custody battle, and I had gone to the court to ask, let this child be with me. And the court had to apply the best interest of the child standard for me in a very personal way. So that really brought me much closer to the story of that couple in the cabin and the intended parents. And that's probably why my therapist told me to write this book more, because I got a lot closer to it and found a personal angle beyond the research. But it was research on something that I cared about. It was research on something that I could relate to in a way, not that I was a surrogate or anything. In The Good Samaritan, this is a story of a college professor who's up for tenure. He's had kind of a rough patch, and he's got one last chance at tenure. And he's got an ex-wife and a 16-year-old daughter up in the Twin Cities, and he commutes every Sunday night down to a fictional Minnesota liberal arts college, Lutheran. It's called St. Gustav. It's a little farther away than the ones you're probably thinking of. So he had to go a little farther drive. But one night, this is the first page, he gets caught in a hailstorm, and he pulls over to seek shelter. And in the headlights, he sees a body, and it's a little boy. Unfortunately, he's been drinking. He's got a few problems, so he's making bad choices, and also he can't really call the cops. So what he does on that day, what launches the rest of the book. And it affects his tenure situation, his ex-wife, his relationship with his daughter. All those things come into play, as opposed to, is he committing crimes here, or is he trying to help? And what inspired me is the Good Samaritan statutes, where, the law says if you help someone on the side of the road or anywhere, you will be immune from, liability if you hurt them. And a woman in my book club, her father actually pulled a guy out of a burning car, and in pulling the guy along, he broke the guy's arm in pulling him out of the car. And after he got him to the side and his arm was broken, the car exploded. And that person with the broken arm sued him. And so I really thought that was fascinating because this guy, Matthew, is in the Good Samaritan, is a sociology professor. And I chose that because that is the study of how we create a community, including law, and how we create the kind of world we want to live in. Do we want to kind of live in a world where we still will help each other even if we're afraid of being sued? And when a statute says you will not have liability if you hurt someone, will you still go and do it? What is it that as humans that makes us jump out and help somebody who's in trouble? And what gets in the way of us doing that? And those are the kinds of things I wanted to think about while I was spending 4 years writing the book.
Toni, you wrote your books in first person. Why did you decide on first person instead of the more common third person?
I wrote them first in third person. That's, I guess, part of my process. I didn't think about it, but I write first in third person because I don't know the story because I'm a pantser. So these people are not me. They're some other people, and I'm just like, he did this and she did that, sort of like when you're playing with dolls or you're telling a story outside of yourself and you're just watching it. But then once I've finished the story and I know them better, I change it and I rewrite it in first person and I try to be them and feel what that would feel like. Even if it's a person who's not like me in demographics or in career or in personality or whatever, and I would make different choices, I try to really be them and write in their voice, and it helps me get closer to their heart, I think. And if I can understand them better, then I hope then the reader can really understand them better.
So, Sharon, what's next on your book agenda?
Well, I'm just finishing up working title, Liar, Liar.
Well, we're talking about lawyers again?
They don't even play a part in this one. How did that happen? You know what? Rewrite time.
Why do we hate lawyers so much? Oh, so I wanted to tell you why, maybe this is why. I wanted to tell you why I like reading the city ordinances. So if you had occasion to read your city code, you had a problem. I'm sorry that you had to do that because you were specifically looking for something that was probably unpleasant. And that is hilarious to me. Because the way the city codes vary from municipality to municipality is interesting. And again, it's the society. It's based on what that community cares about. What are the cats doing? Which way are the cars parked? How high can your weeds grow? These are just some of the problems I've had, but there are much worse problems that are addressed in the city ordinances. And they're written terribly as a whole. Sometimes the law is written after the problems happen. That's when you're reading, you're like, oh, obviously they had a problem with somebody's garbage or what to do with, dead bodies or what kind of roadkill you can eat, right? Like those kinds of things happened. They write it down because somebody made a choice. And the rest of the community said, we don't ever want that to happen again, or here's how we're going to organize it. And I find that fascinating about human nature. So I want to try to get ahead of that, Sharon, and guess what have they not thought of that some human being's going to do and have to have a city write an ordinance to prevent that.
All right. Do we have any audience questions?
Okay, Sharon, you sound like a perfectionist in your research, and you have at least 3 different police forces in Death on a Stick. Did you see a difference in the culture in the different police forces that you researched, and did you have any particular liking or disliking of them? And also, did you find a difference between, like, the detective divisions and the beat cops that you researched?
Pete didn't work with other detectives in Murder on a Stick because it happened in St. Paul. But, for example, he did, I'm trying to think which book it was. It might have been Blinded by the Sight. he calls the Minneapolis Police Department for some information, and the detective from the Minneapolis Police Department says things must be really boring over in St. Paul. If you're asking these kinds of questions, why don't you come over here and get a real job?
All this tough talk is scaring me and my characters. But somebody made Barney Fife look like a Chippendale, or?
Oh yeah, that was in Blinded by the Sight.
Just saying. Okay, yeah.
I'm really curious by the whole process of writing in third person, setting it aside, tweaking it back in first person. So multiple questions about that. Like, does any of it remain in third person? Does it all always convert? Like, and as a pantser, does the story change then? Like, have you found a hybrid between plotting and pantser by doing that?
I love that question. Thank you. The whole thing changes. A minimum 7 times I rewrite the whole thing from scratch. It's not like I'm just tweaking the manuscript. I start over. Maybe that's why it takes me so long, but I should probably revisit that. The first time I go from third person to first, I just do the change of pronoun. I try to just do that. I'm constantly then finding things that I want to come back to. So I circle it or tab it so that I want to come back, because there's something powerful that I saw right away in just making that change. I also read it aloud in first person. And so after I've done that, change the whole thing, and maybe I allow myself a few changes as I go, but I try to keep it that. I read it aloud, and I have my family members all take a part, and then I hear them read it. So I hear, roughly a man that age and roughly a young person, that age. And I hear things that I immediately realize need to be addressed, or I hear opportunities for improvement. Even if it doesn't need to be addressed, I hear, ooh, there's something I can really exploit and take advantage of and make it better there. And so each time I look at it, I'll go through like carving deeper down until I'm carving till I find the person. And it can be their word choice or their silence, I find, which I didn't know way up here when I was just telling myself a story like 3 little bears went in the woods. I didn't really understand this one bear really deeply, where he might just sit quietly and I could really feel what he was feeling when this other stuff was happening. And so then finding a way to show that on the page, either through his gesture or his action or some new sound that he might make. But through hearing it and reading it myself, that helps a lot. But yeah, it changes a lot.
So, Sharon, are you an indie writer, or are you both traditional published?
I was published by a small press for books 1 and 3, and I'm indie now.
So my question is, and this is for both of you, in terms of marketing, could you just speak a little bit about that? On the traditional side, I'm just wondering, do you ever find that HarperCollins does not market enough for you, or are you satisfied with it? And then on the indie side, how do you set up that marketing yourself?
I had no expectations going in. I had no idea what marketing would be. I mean, even though I had taken some classes in it. But I got a sense that the author, no matter who your publisher is, the author's really got to take charge, really got to be doing most of the lifting, most of the rowing, whatever the metaphor is, that we authors have to be involved in talking about our books and connecting with readers. And that's something that I enjoy doing. So it wasn't like, oh no, I'm going to have to do that. It was like, fun, let's collaborate. How does this work? What can I do? And we had some, I think it was COVID times, we had some Zoom meetings with their various sales, marketing, publicity. They had like many different people on that team of getting it out. And I tried to present myself as a collaborator. But of course, I had been 30 years in the legal profession doing lots of networking and marketing. And so I had, of course, my own expectations or experiences with what that means, and zero with publishing. So, I really don't know what is going on inside their offices outside of that Zoom call. But I did a lot of research on that and a lot of networking with other authors. from HarperCollins, but also from other publishers. And the theme seems to, the thing I think happens is that they have a certain amount of money that they can spend, and there are very few people left to do the work. And there are millions of new books published every Tuesday. Every Tuesday is the day. I can hardly keep up with them myself in books I want to read. I can't imagine how. So they put that money towards the big, huge ones, and then the rest of us, we're there, we're on the bench, we're on the team, but we're not, the $1 million players. So that's okay for me. That's okay. I mean, we're not all going to be out there. I'm thrilled that I go to a bookstore and my book is on the shelf. I mean, that's my dream come true. That's like, I can't even imagine anything better than that. So however they got that out there and they made that happen is thrilling. I mean, Devin was able to get my books and they're sitting on this table, and all the independent bookstores in the Twin Cities, I go into the stores, I get to know the bookstore owners, and I mean, that is a fun, wonderful, fun experience. And going into a library and talking to them about books, I mean, that is something I haven't done before, but if you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, as a reader, those are the things that you do, but you're doing it as a writer. It's a fun in a whole nother gear. I went from knowing nothing to just educating myself and then doing as much as I possibly can, and it has been a blast. It's been a blast.
It's been tough for me. I do book launches. I have found, for example, Facebook does nothing, well, at least nothing evident or observable in helping me sell books. When I wrote Murder on a Stick, I was just finishing it. It was not yet published, and I got a letter from the State Fair Foundation asking for donations. It included a phone number at the bottom. You should never give me a phone number if you don't want to call. So I called them up and I told them who I was, and I said I wrote a book called Murder on a Stick and was wondering if I could sell it at the State Fair. And the woman referred me to Fairware, if you know of that booth. So I got a hold of the guy who managed that booth, and he said, yeah, you'd be willing to sell it. So he sold 106 copies the first year, just sitting on a shelf. So the next year, he said, when I picked up the leftover books, if you want to sell it again here next year, we will. So a friend of mine who's also my beta reader said, you should call and ask if they'll sell your other 2 books as well. So I said, but they have nothing to do with the State Fair. And she said, just ask. So I asked and he said, sure. So they sold all 3 books. And then he said, when I picked up the extras, if you want to come out here a few days and sign books, we'd be happy to have you. So I did that. And the last year, I was there all 12 days from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. because, you know what? I'm not a quitter. So
and
anyway,
if you have a book club you'd like either one of us to join, we'd be happy to come.
So the last year I sold 100 books a day, and I loved it. I loved the State Fair experience because people would come up and say hi, and you had a new book. I'd love a copy. I'll never forget because this, I don't often think of middle-aged, men in their 30s to 40s as being lovers of my books necessarily. This guy came up one day.
I was wondering what she was going to say.
Yeah. Lovers of me either. But he said, I have your first 3 books. I want to copy the new one and another set of all 4. And it's like, whoa. But people would come up and say how much they liked the books, and it was so good for my ego. The other thing I did is I used to go to I would call senior citizen high-rises or not nursing homes, but high-rises, apartment complexes, and asked to speak to the activity director and set up events there. And that worked well. But then in 2014, I moved down to Florida for 4.5 years to take care of my mom. And when I came back, it wasn't really possible anymore because my vision had deteriorated enough. But anyway, so, I heard an author once say the best way to sell a book is to write another book. Guess what I'm doing?
Hey! Thank you.
Any last questions? Anybody? I have one for both of you. This is a really short one. Is there a absolute go-to author when their book comes out, you have to buy it, whether it's a audio book or whether it's a printed book? Sharon, first you.
William Kent Kruger.
Okay.
Emma Straub.
Emma Straub, okay. I've been asking this question for 3.5 years, hoping someday somebody's going to say Rob Young.
Oh, I forgot.
Can I get a booth at the State Fair?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give these two splendid ladies a great round of applause.
Thanks for joining us for this encore presentation for Minnesota Mystery Night.
Our thanks to Louis DeMars, the sound engineer who captured the conversation in the first place, and to Lucky's 13 in Mendota for hosting the event.
We also want to thank the sponsors who help keep the mystery alive: Midwest Mystery Works, Twin City Sisters in Crime, and Once Upon a Crime Bookstore.
And if you'd like more Minnesota Mystery Night, it lives on as Masters of Mystery Radio Hour, airing on stations across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and South Dakota. Check your local station, and if Masters of Mystery is not on their schedule, reach out and ask them to add it.
For the current schedule, reservations, and all the latest details, head to mnmysterynight.com.
If you like this podcast, check out the full network of podcasts Bell Cow has to offer at bellcowproductions.com.
In addition to Mystery Conversations, we have Story Lab, Field Notes, the Author Roundup, and who knows what else we'll cook up.
Thanks for listening. Keep following the clues.
And while you're following the bell cow back to the barn, try not to step in anything.